You know, strange as it may seem, they give ball players nowadays very peculiar names.
Funny names?
Nicknames, pet names.
Not as funny as my name, Sebastian Dinwiddie.
Oh, yes.
Funnier than that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Now, on the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second. I don't know's on third.
That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team.
I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
Do you know the fellas' names?
Yes.
Well, then who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean the fellow's name on first base.
Who?
The fellow playing first base for St. Louis.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who is on first?
Well, what are you asking me for?
Abbott and Costello still call to mind a very specific kind of American comedy. Machine gun timing, vaudeville precision, and the immortal confusion of who's on first. For years, Bud Abbott and Lou Costello looked inseparable, a double act so famous their names practically fused into one. On screen, they were all rhythm and chaos, with Bud setting the trap and Lou stumbling right into it. Off screen, though, the relationship was never quite as effortless as the act made it seem. Money fights, bruised egos, studio pressure, personal tragedy, tax trouble, and years of constant work slowly turned one of show business's biggest partnerships into something far more strained. Before we get into it, head to the comments section and tell us which man you think pushed the breakup further, Bud or Lou. This is the story of why Abbott and Costello broke up and why their friendship was never the same again. First click. Their story really began because Bud Abbott was exactly the kind of performer every comic wanted beside them. He was a master straight man, calm, sharp, and dependable. When Lou Costello's regular partner failed to show at Brooklyn's Casino Theater in 1931, Bud stepped in, and the chemistry was obvious almost immediately. Lou brought something completely different. He had physical energy, quick panic, and a way of making confusion feel fresh even when the matter was familiar. Bud could feed him the setup, and Lou could turn a routine into a mini explosion. That balance is what made the act work so well and so fast. They were not a soft, sentimental pair from the start. Even in the good years, they argued. Their personalities were very different, and that contrast helped the comedy, but could also create friction away from the stage. Still, the act was too strong to deny. That strength carried them from burlesque to radio, Broadway, and film. By the early 1940s, they were huge stars. Their movies were hits, the public adored them, and during the war years, they rose to a level of fame and earnings that made them one of the hottest acts in entertainment. Built-in tensions.
Well, I don't want those girls at my party.
Why not?
I mean, after all, whenever there's two girls and you have them over for a party or anything like that, and when we go to a show or anything, right away you say to me, you take this one over here. And I'm always left with the other one, whether I want her or not.
Oh,
sometimes you don't know how I feel. Sometimes I don't want that girl.
Oh, well,
and you always take the best looking
Oh,
one.
now, let's not get
It's about time I had the best looking
Let's
one.
not get personal.
Yours was pretty.
Oh, so what?
Yours had teeth.
Well, yours had teeth, too.
Did you see that tooth on mine?
Yes, I saw it.
Mine had so much bridge work, every time I kissed her, I had to pay toll.
The same differences that made Abbott and Costello funny also made them difficult partners. Bud was disciplined and controlled. Lou was more emotional, more reactive, and more likely to take a slight personally. When things were going well, they could absorb that. When pressure increased, those traits became harder to manage. One recurring sore spot was money. Lou felt that as the main comic and the obvious crowd magnet, he deserved more. This was not a small disagreement. In a comedy team, money always says something about status, and status can become poison when two people are tied together professionally every day. There were also fights over billing, projects, and basic respect. Lou was said to get irritated if people casually mixed up the names or treated Bud as the more important half. That may sound petty, but in a business built on image, those things added up. And yet the relationship was not simply hatred waiting to happen. By several accounts, they were protective of each other. If someone spoke badly about Bud around Lou, that went over badly. And the reverse was also true. They bickered, but they were still linked by loyalty and habit in ways outsiders did not always understand. The cracks deepen.
Have you got 2 10s for a 5? Just so happen to have it. That's it. Now, that Elizabeth, I like her. She's a regular scout, that's why. 100%. That's a woman that knows her stuff. Now, let's see, the baggage room is here. The baggage room is around here somewhere. Look, you know where it is? Just a minute. What? What's wrong?
Just a minute. $15 went south.
Success brought money, but it also brought exhaustion. Abbott and Costello were working constantly, and the act that made them famous had to keep delivering under bigger and bigger expectations. Audiences still loved the old routines, but entertainment was changing, and over time, the team was seen as relying too heavily on familiar material. That kind of overexposure can wear down any act. If the public starts treating what once felt electric as something expected, performers begin to feel boxed in. A team can survive that if the partners are pulling together. It's much harder when old resentments are already sitting below the surface. Lou also carried tremendous grief after the 1943 drowning death of his young son. That loss seems to have altered the course of his life. He kept working, but people close to the story have long suggested he was never quite the same. His health suffered, and the emotional toll did not simply disappear because the curtain went up. Bud did show up for Lou in meaningful ways. He supported efforts connected to Lou's son's memorial foundation, and the two even toured to help raise money. Bud also had serious health issues of his own, including epilepsy, and Lou looked out for him. So even as the partnership grew more fragile, it still contained real care. Money trouble.
Calm down. I think I'll take a fling at this thing. Where's the money?
Oh, I got it right here.
My money, yes.
Okay, I got it.
No, get it out. Is it all there?
I saved it all, every bit of it.
It's 10s, 20s, yes.
Some 50s?
Couple
50,
of 50s,
50,
yes.
50,
50.
20, 10, 10.
Yeah. What was that?
Somebody put a buck in there.
All right, give it to me.
Okay.
Now, let's go. No, I said all of it.
Oh, shoot.
That's the idea. No. Give me the bill. That's the idea. Give me that bill. Give me your hand. Put it in my hand like that and leave it there.
Okay.
That's better. Now we can...
By the mid-1950s, the partnership was no longer protected by momentum. Their Universal contract was nearing its end, and the industry itself was changing. They had been giants, but giants don't stay on top forever, especially when the act is under strain and negotiations are getting tougher. When the studio relationship fell apart, it removed one more piece of structure holding them together. Then came the tax disaster. The IRS hit both men with major back tax problems, and that turned tension into crisis. Financial trouble has a way of making every old grievance feel larger. Their gambling habits did not help. By one account, both men loved to gamble and were not especially good at it. That's an almost comic detail until the bills arrive. What had once been survivable in the peak years became much uglier once income slowed and debts grew more threatening. This is where many people place the final break. The tax problems were not necessarily the only reason they split, but they were the moment when the damage became impossible to ignore. By 1957, Abbott and Costello were done as a team. The breakup looked bitter, and from the outside, it was easy to believe they wanted nothing more to do with each other. After the split.
For instance, I'd say, who's on first? I'm explaining the players.
Yeah.
Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third.
Well, if I'm going to work with this team, I'd like to know who's on first.
That's right. That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
Well, what?
Well, what's on second?
What? Well, who's on first?
That's right. Now,
What's right?
Well, what's on second?
Look, I don't care.
The sad twist is that the cleanest version of the story is not quite true. It's often said that Bud Abbott and Lou Costello broke up and never spoke again, but people close to them later pushed back on that idea. They did split, and the relationship was badly wounded, but there were also signs that the bond never fully disappeared. Lou tried to keep going, making solo appearances and one feature film of his own, but the decline was hard to miss. His health was failing, and only 2 years after the breakup, he died of a heart attack in 1959 at just 52 years old. For a man who had given so much frantic life to the screen, that ending felt especially cruel. Bud was devastated by Lou's death. He served as a pallbearer, and later, when watching Abbott and Costello on television, he reportedly grew emotional and said, quote, "I just miss my buddy." That's not the reaction of a man who had neatly erased his partner from his heart. Bud lived much longer, but not more happily. He never again found the same success, struggled financially, suffered strokes, a broken hip, and cancer, and ended his life in poor health and near ruin. In the end, their partnership did break apart, and the silence between the old magic and the final years was real. But the deeper story is sadder than simple hatred. They were two men who could not keep the act, the business, and the friendship from tearing at each other until there was too little time to mend it. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think Abbott and Costello fell apart mainly because of money and pressure, or do you think the deeper problem was that their personalities were always bound to clash? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.